A vote among Occupy protesters shelved. Calls on police to seriously deal with attacks on journalists. And police say a man arrested in connection with last night's violence.
Good evening. It is day 29 of the Occupy protests, and demonstrators remain on the streets at various locations. Leaders of the Occupy movement have shelved a vote originally set for tonight and tomorrow evening for supporters at 3 protest areas. Meanwhile, police have arrested a 61-year-old man in connection with last night's assault on reporters and cameramen at an anti-Occupy rally in Chimsa Choi. This after TVB News wrote to the chief executive and the commissioner of police today, calling for resolute action to bring the culprits to justice. We begin our coverage with the report from Evelina Lung about how and why the decision was reached to shelve the vote at the occupation areas.
It was meant to be a counter-proposal for the government. But just hours before it was supposed to be held, a vote on 2 motions relating to a report to Beijing on local sentiment and a new platform for dialogue was shelved by organizers of the Occupy campaign. They announced the decision this afternoon and apologized to their supporters. Top Occupy figures acknowledged the complexity of the vote. Also, there were questions raised on just how effective it would be.
We have volunteer workers, and also outside, we have gone to the occupied areas to have discussion with the occupiers. And we have received comments, opinions, views that concerning the content of the motion and also about the format of having a voting in the plaza. There seem to be very different views.
Leaders of the movement will be holding further discussions to decide what their next step will be. Some demonstrators at the Admiralty protest site voiced support for the announcement. The issues relating to the vote are too complicated. Some people may not be able to understand them, this man said. This one, meanwhile, questioned the effectiveness of the vote, saying a similar referendum had already been held earlier this year. She did applaud the organizers for admitting their mistakes. Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam also waded into the controversy today. She says she doesn't know what the vote stands for. Lam also said the government has already expressed its sincerity in trying to resolve the current crisis by reaching out to the students proactively to discuss the matter. Evelina Lang, TVB News.
1 reporter and 2 cameramen from TVB News were attacked last night while covering an anti-Occupy Central rally in Chimsa Choi. An RTHK reporter also said she came under attack during the event. Police have arrested a 61-year-old man in Chunwan on suspicion of common assault, criminal damage, and assault occasioning actual bodily harm. Evelina Leung has more details.
The attacks happened last night near the Chimsa Choi clock tower during a rally held by a number of groups in support of the police. At one point, emotions ran high among some in the crowd. A TVB News cameraman tried to move in to film the event, but he was attacked by some people nearby. A TVB reporter and another cameraman attempted to find out more about the chaos and to help their colleague. They also came under attack. One person forcefully pulled on the reporter's tie. Another ripped off the glasses of one of the cameramen. The reporter's glasses got knocked off as well, leaving scratches on his face. The trio were later escorted away by the police. The people who surrounded the TVB news staff then applauded, chanting aloud, "Support the police." The 3 TVB employees were sent to Queen Elizabeth Hospital for examination. One of the cameramen, Edwin Lui, who was the first to be attacked, had his shirt torn in the incident. He suffered a number of cuts, scratches and bruises during the scuffles. Lui said a man at the rally pulled his camera strap and the camera fell to the ground. When Lui said he was going to file a police report, the man attempted to flee. Then more people moved in, pushing and shoving him around. TVB reporter John Xian said when he and the other cameraman, Anson Pun, arrived at the scene to help Lui, they too came under attack. Xian said he was wearing the press identification armband at the time, but was still assaulted. He said he was punched and kicked multiple times. A camera of the TVB news team was briefly taken away by someone at the scene. TVB got it back later after reporting to the police about the loss of property. An RTHK reporter said she was also assaulted at the rally. Evelyn Lang, TVB News.
Well, TVB News today has sent letters to Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying and Commissioner of Police Andy Zung calling for an investigation into the attacks on journalists and resolute action to bring the culprits to justice. The Office of the Chief Executive responded, stating that the government respects press freedom and the police will seriously follow up on the incident. The violence last night also drew condemnations from journalist associations, as well as one of the organizers of the rally. Owen Fung reports.
In the 2 letters, TVB News strongly condemns what happened last night, stressing that violent attacks on journalists cannot be tolerated. The broadcaster calls on the chief executive to task the police commissioner with bringing the assailants to justice to prevent similar violence from happening again and safeguard the rule of law in Hong Kong. In its letter to the police chief, TVB News says officers at the scene last night could have immediately stopped and arrested the assailants. It urges the police to follow up on every lead, carry out a just and fair investigation, and bring the culprits to justice. In response, the Office of the Chief Executive states that the CE and the SAR government respect press freedom while assuring that the police will seriously follow up on the matter. Chief Secretary for Administration Carrie Lam also deplored last night's violence. She said the government will protect journalists in carrying out their duties. The police expressed their deep concern about the incident.
These cases have been classified as assault occasioning actual bodily harm, criminal damage, and common assault, and are now being investigated by the Regional Crime Unit of Kowloon West region.
Elsewhere, 6 media and journalist organizations have condemned the violence and petitioned the police. They demanded a thorough investigation into recent attacks on journalists.
Any attack on journalists is not just on him or her, but on the press freedom and on the rights to know for every citizen in Hong Kong.
The Hong Kong Journalists Association has also demanded a meeting with the Commissioner of Police to discuss the matter. Meanwhile, Letitia Lee, one of the organizers of the rally last night, condemned the attack, stating that the organizers did not instigate the violence. Owen Fung, TVB News.
The attack on journalists also drew criticisms from lawmakers, including the LegCo president.
Any acts of violence must be condemned, regardless of who the victims may be. I believe it is also the responsibility of any organization, any individual holding mass meeting in public to make sure that such acts of violence should not take place. Of course, it's also the police responsibility to maintain public order and protect the safety of all people present.
Pan-democratic legislators have also issued a statement stating that attacks on journalists cannot be tolerated.
The financial secretary has warned that the Occupy protests would damage governance and the rule of law even more so than the economy. In his latest blog entry, John Tsang appealed to protesters to consider Hong Kong's future. He also compared Hong Kong to Rome, saying it takes a long time to build the two cities, yet they can be destroyed very easily. And on a campaign by pan-democratic lawmakers to refuse to cooperate with the government, he wrote that 21 projects held up by filibustering resulted in a total cost increase of $1 billion.
Chinese university academic says he does not see concrete evidence of foreign forces orchestrating the Occupy Central movement. And amid the impasse, Simon Shen called for a rethink on the way forward over political reform. Liz Yun reports.
Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying and former CE Tung Chee-hwa have both said that there are external forces backing the Occupy Central movement, but some have questioned those claims. Among them, Professor Simon Shen, co-director of International Affairs Research Center in the Hong Kong Institute of Asia-Pacific Studies at Chinese University. Shen said even though overseas countries such as the US and Britain have expressed their opinions towards the movement, it doesn't mean they will play a role in the Occupy protest.
I don't think there's any obvious linkage between the movements and the foreign powers.
He also warned the Occupy protesters not to expect any immediate changes in the near future. Shen said instead of being forced to choose between idealism and reality, there is an alternative.
So what I'm proposing is that at least we have to keep our ideals. Constructivists, they are to some extent idealists and realists. They wish to promote the ideals, they wish to promote the values by influencing the others, so that maybe you can't achieve this goal in the short run, but you are shaping the mentality of many people, and then you are setting constraints for the establishment, and you are creating some norms for the entire society, and that's already very constructive.
Shen added people shouldn't try to apply international standards when it comes to political reform in Hong Kong, because the city is only a special administrative region of China. Liz Yun, TVB News.
And still ahead in our newscast, a presidential runoff election underway in Brazil. An active lava flow poses threats to some residents of Hawaii. And a preview of Mussolini's bomb shelter in Rome.